Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank you to the Jefferson Educational Society for elevating early child care as a mainstream and profoundly important economic development initiative for the city of Erie. I'll give a brief presentation that is the start of a thumbnail of the report that's available on the Jefferson website. Foremost, I'll be inviting up to join members of the team that have worked diligently over the past 6 months to run down what's the issue, why should we care, how big is it, what should we do, and what would it cost, or how to go about addressing early child care. I also want to acknowledge that the Jefferson Educational Society has a number of other reports related to early child care, which are illustrative of their overall commitment to recognizing, as I said, that this is germane to Erie being a top city to live, work, play, and grow a child, and to compete and win the competition for young, talented knowledge workers, or as I'll mention earlier, the pro-creative class. So with that, you can see the members of our team that worked on the report over the past 6 months. Karen and Michelle, or Andrea, are not able to be with us today, and they work and reside on the other side of the state as well. So a couple of first sort of introductory comments. We chose to focus this report specifically on the city of Erie, the geography of the city of Erie, and on infants and toddlers. The strategic decision is kind of obvious. One, the city is a locus around, or a size that's manageable, that increases the prospects for making some impact in the dearth or the deficiency of slots for infants and toddlers. Also, as I'll illustrate later, cities have a very important role to have a hand in the provision and enabling the marketplace for early child care. And the decision to focus on the first 1,000 plus days of life, that is birth to age 3, rests on a number of hard realities. One, it is the forgotten age group that isn't addressed in the formal education system. Funding sources are not a plenty for child care professionals of infants and toddlers. They're the hardest group to educate. They require some of the most intense education credentialing, and the most expensive for child care providers to address in a community. Also, infants and toddlers are the least tracked. It's the hardest data that one might find, despite it being the most formative time of the human brain, which you'll hear about. The bottom line of the report is there are far too slots available for child care openings for infants and toddlers in the city relative to the number of children in need of care. Competition is very high to get children enrolled in quality, affordable care. Parents simply do not have enough choice. Children without access to good child care in those earliest 1,000 days of life tend to be very expensive to catch up to their more fortunate peers throughout their lifelong learning. And early child care is a determinant from a cost perspective also as to whether one is an asset or otherwise throughout their life to a community. Altogether, the multi-sided financial toll creates economic loss for families and their employers, both upon which Erie's prospects for prosperity depend. For this reason, investment in child care for our youngest is increasingly cited as having a greater payoff than traditional workforce and economic development initiatives. And I'd go so far to say that any economic development play or subsidy that denies funding from our public school systems ought to be seriously questioned. I will come back to that a little later. This is not a social issue. Child care is mainstream economic development, both near and long term. It's one of the workforce and economic development strategies that, frankly, Erie has yet to deploy in its otherwise Herculean efforts to turn around our economy and to stem the tide of generational population loss and a shortage of workforce presently that stymies our economic growth. Overall, the report is a blueprint and a call to action. It prevents the steps that Erie is recommended to take to reap the immense payoffs for Erie's children, families, and businesses, and thus the city and all of us at large. So we'll begin with the question of why should one care about the issue? And I'll invite Tiffany up to give us the on-the-ground reality, as she is the operator of the ABC 24-hour childcare. Tiffany.
Is it on yet? Or true? Okay. You figured out this one? Yep, thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon now. My name is Tiffany Levette, and I am the founder of Her Power Incorporated. We started a childcare program called ABC 24-hour childcare. Is it 24 hours? Yes, it is. ABC 24-hour childcare to meet the demand and to address and help to meet the needs that we saw women experiencing here in the Erie community. So my presentation, let me see, I'll come out because I like to walk and talk. That's it. Okay, so call it testing. Okay, we're good there. Thank you. So being that I'm an owner of a child care facility, we have to have everything in our brain, like right here in our phone. So all of my notes for any presentation that I do, whether it's with you guys, my staff, or the parents, is right here in my phone. So pardon me for the use of my phone, but this is how we have to do it now. So the first 1,000 days of life, this is where we see the process of epistemology take place. It begins in the brain as the child experiences growth and development and is always stimulated. The epistemology. Epistemology is the process of development that begins primarily at birth. Many would also argue that it begins at conception. That's something that I believe that epistemology begins at conception as well. However, the primary development that I want to talk to you about today is epistemology that begins at birth. So the way that we view the world according to our epistemological lens, how is it crafted? How are we shaped according to culture, environment, spaces? This is why learning is so critical in the early stages of life. During those first 1,000 days, the child learns to speak. The child learns what to feel, how to communicate. The child is stimulated. The child grows and develops with the parents and adults and other stimulus in their environment. Child care providers and teachers and parents are responsible for what they allow in your child's space. So hiring staff with a knowledge base is imperative in developing and helping children develop. Caregivers and teachers are not babysitters. This has been a misconception for many decades in our culture. But I do believe that the pandemic has helped us to see that child care providers are not just babysitters. We are actually not babysitters at all. We educate our children from infancy on up. Does anyone here understand and know how to educate an infant? How could you actually teach and educate an infant? Let me see a hand. Oh my goodness, you guys found a new respect for child care providers. So the other, in order to meet the high quality standards, right, we have to meet state mandated requirements. We have to follow an approved curriculum, approve lesson plans, approve assessments. This means that the state has tested it out and said, yep, this meets our learning standards. This is something that you can use. And guess what? These programs are not cheap. These programs cost us thousands of dollars in order to implement each year. We have setup fees, renewal fees, monthly fees, access fees, anything that you can think of related to childcare costs tons of money. The state, as well as the STARS program, requires educational minimums, a minimum of CDA in many cases, if you want to have the higher quality STARS rating. So some of you may be familiar with STARS, some maybe not, but the STAR rating goes from a star 1 to a star 4, 4 being the highest quality. And what this means is it increases the reimbursement that you receive back for providing care to the children. This is how we're able to afford higher wages for our staff. We're able to afford benefit packages for our staff and incentives. And we'll talk about why that's important in just one moment. A large number of centers, more recently, require a minimum of a CDA. Why? Because we all want to have the highest quality rating. We want to provide quality care to the Erie community. So through state funding, these programs in Pennsylvania Key, many of us have been able to send our staff through these programs to school at no additional cost, very minimal additional cost to the facility, but no cost to that person. Why is there a cost for the facility? Because as they're learning, as they're in school, we're paying them, for that training time. So many of us absorb the costs for them to be in class, for them to test, for them to study as they're working in a child care facility. How hard is it to recruit and retain credentialed teachers? Anybody in here in the work field now, how difficult is it for you all to recruit and retain staff? Anybody having a problem with that now with hiring? Oh my goodness, it's something that we're all experiencing. And a major thing in childcare is that we are experiencing the increase in costs, the increase in payroll, but the reimbursement is not necessarily adding up with what those increased costs we see going out of the facility. Many of us childcare owners have decided to remove ourselves from receiving a salary at all because it's what we've had to do in order to have higher quality staff. So for me, if I wanted to have a master level certified teacher for my preschool program, guess what I needed to do? I had to move me out the way. And because I want to see my program excel, that's something that I did not have a problem with sacrificing and doing. And guess what? I still show up for work every day, every single shift. I'm there, I'm available, I'm communicating with staff, I'm working in the business and on the business. How many of you would still show up for work if you didn't get paid? It's a gift. I'm telling you, it's a gift. But it's something that we all believe in. My team, they see how much that I sacrifice. If I expect that you'll change a diaper, guess what? I'm going to get down and change a diaper with you. And also, when you said soles to the ground, yes, definitely. That was what I was thinking of. Last time we did the earring thing, but today I said, you know what? I'm going to go in with sneakers because I want them to see like what this childcare thing really looks like. And we really have to get our soles. When I say soles to the ground, I've never worn sneakers with a dress like this before, but today I did. It's out of my comfort zone because literally childcare providers and workers are putting the pedal really to the metal, grinding, coming in early, staying late. My staff are coming in on weekends twice a month because we have staff training, we have parent conferences, and I'm just trying to pour so much into my program. And the staff are sacrificing as well. 1 minute, thank you. The third party, hiring sites. Why is it difficult? Oh my goodness, finding people that have the credentials that you're looking for. Now, even though we do have an increased number of individuals that have CDAs, I've definitely seen that from the investment that has gone in from the state, from the STARS programs, helping to pay for these individuals to get their credentials. So my program, for example, we out of our 13 staff, everyone has their credential except for our 2 newest staff. So this is thanks to those who have invested. So what it is we need, because we're spending, so far I've probably spent about $4,000 on Indeed this year alone. What we need is investment. We need all of you to get your sneakers on the ground, your soles on the ground with us. We need you to come in and help volunteer. We need you to take field trips with us. We need you to come in and read to the kids. We need you to, if you have an extra box of paper, take it to a daycare facility near you. So we just ask that you would help us to invest in early childhood education. We need economic impact in early childhood. And as we grow and as we become larger, we have to invest in childcare systems in Erie County. Diverse Erie, for example, has invested in a total of 8 childcare programs in the Erie area, and we have given a total of $115,000 in grants to help these programs. All of them were Black BIPOC owned to survive. So we're also asking you, if you don't have the money to put into these facilities, guess what? Come in, be a volunteer, and help your local daycares out. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. And now I'll invite Michelle Harkins to continue connecting the dots for us all. Michelle?
Thanks, Dorothy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Harkins. I'm the Executive Director of Early Connections. Early Connections has 5 Star 4 quality centers. It's the highest quality centers throughout Erie County. We are also very involved with workforce development in the Northwest region. So what that means is we work with registered apprenticeships, that's the non-traditional workers in childcare centers, and registered pre-apprenticeships throughout the Northwest region. We want those individuals to receive their credentials for free. So what we're here to talk about, I get to talk about the charts, right? So your first chart that we're going to share with you talks a little bit about there's too few licensed childcare providers serving infants and toddlers throughout the city of Erie. So in the middle bubble says that families lack choice, insufficient supply of affordable quality childcare for Erie's infants and toddlers. In his report, Court stated this so well. Parents who have been through this know that birth through age 3 is a twilight zone. It really is. And sort of a free-for-all when it comes to childcare. New parents scramble to decode the childcare system because it is rather complicated. Childcare is a broken market that makes employers directly vulnerable. So what are we talking about when we say that? We're the workforce behind the workforce. People can't go to work if someone isn't taking care of their children consistently and with quality. Can they go to work and know that their child is safely cared for? I believe Tiffany spoke very eloquently about that a little bit. So what is causing all this to happen? This is a big problem, and we want you to work with us to help address it. Most of it revolves around staffing. Classrooms that are waiting to serve our little ones are empty until the staff are hired with qualifications and we can open the rooms. That's part of the issue. And if you look at the next bubble, okay, the childcare staffing crisis, childcare centers struggle to pay teachers a living wage. Teachers end up leaving centers. They kind of bounce around. We call it sometimes musical chairs. So they go to the most highest paid centers, and you might see them around different places, or they just give up. They leave the childcare profession altogether, and that's heartbreaking. We need more just caring, quality individuals in our centers. So next, add to that the staff-to-child ratio, and Tiffany shared that a little bit. The staff-to-child ratio to serve infants and toddlers, so it's with some grants, it's 1-to-4. It's typically 1-to-4 with infants, 1-to-5 for toddlers, and it goes up. But depending on your grant structure, you might need 1 teacher per 4 children. Now, I have twins. It was hard to manage too. Imagine what these wonder staff are doing to keep our children safe. So they're very high skilled, high quality, and the children are learning even at the youngest age. So that's a big problem. This is, a stressful position for the teachers. If you imagine 4 children screaming and crying in unison and you're trying to help them. And for those that do remain in the field, they're overstressed and overworked. And next, of course, the funding constraints, hurdles for certification that Tiffany spoke about. The high cost to provide high quality care leads to, and please remember this, unsustainable business models for providers. These business models are unsustainable. Please don't forget that. Please remember those words. Childcare programs look for the most economical way. To give up your own pay to provide quality at your center. Does this really have to be? Tiffany does a lot of good work in our community, and it's sad to think she has to look at, well, maybe I shouldn't be paid this week so that we can have those quality centers. Next. And I kind of pause on this one because I caution this assumption that most centers are run by professionals that lack business finance expertise. Please be careful with this one. Unfortunately, providers, all of us, don't have the same opportunities, the funding streams that some providers have. That's no fault to the providers that have those opportunities, and it's no fault to those who don't have those opportunities. But while it's a case for some that finance isn't their expertise background, it suggests that getting them business help is going to solve this big issue. It does not fix the wage problem. This is ridiculous. People like us. I've talked to many across the state. I'm president of the Panacea Board, the Pennsylvania Association for the Education of Young Children. This is a problem all over. There are business professionals across the state that are struggling and closing centers. And I think about the Learning Lab, Dr. Leah Spangler. We talk all the time, like, how are we going to make this work? How can we think strategically to help our centers? Directors are walking out. Childcare staff are walking out. How do we maintain and serve the children, the most vulnerable children that desperately need our care? I strongly believe that this isn't a fair statement to make, that we just need to remember the actual cost for caring for infants and toddlers. When reimbursed by the state for this region, it falls short in all the regions. So we are reimbursed up to $9,000 less for infants than the actual cost for quality care. $9,000. It's upsetting. The state's lack of payment based on actual costs and the ability to pay only, if we say, okay, let's charge the private pay families, let's make them pay more. That's not fair. They're already paying so much. And I think that was stated earlier too. Other programs talk about how can they fix this crisis for their center and stay open. They stop taking care of infants and toddlers. And that's self-defeating. We need more care for infants and toddlers. This is not good for our working families, and I think the city of Erie can come up with a better solution. This overall assumption on that bubble that we're talking about is not addressing the staffing solution at all. And next, because of the type of qualification that our teachers have in our centers, determine the level of quality we are awarded. The lack of qualified teachers leads to a lower quality rating, and childcare programs receive a lower level of reimbursement funding support. And that often can mean the available of potential grants and funding streams might be eliminated if you're not a STARS 3 or 4. So this is a big issue. So those centers that are 1 and 2 and moving up, yes, we want them to have quality, but could there be another way to help us all to provide equity across our community? And then, thanks. This, of course, leads to long waiting lists, stress to families, which they can't find safe, affordable, quality care. This is stress on our centers. There are classrooms empty, and they want to hire someone. They want to train them. All they need to have is this desire to want to work with children. We'll work with them. There's opportunities abounds to go to school for free, but we have to find those people and be able to provide them a sustainable living wage. When you have staff that is on the food pantry because they can't afford food, that's a problem. This is a sad reality, and it's a heavy burden on us all. And for the things that are shared here, altogether, it ultimately causes reduced operating hours and closures for our centers. We cannot put any more work on our workers that do show up because they eventually burn out and walk away, sadly. This is going to worsen until we figure the solution out. And I think Court was very brave to bring us all together to try to come up with a solution that we can pilot as a team. I thank you for listening and hope that you can work with us to help find that solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for providing the view inside the system and the challenges. And next to join us from the team is Rita Irwin of the Child Development Centers, who will start to share the external ramifications. Rita?
Hello, everybody. I've been in Child Development Centers for 27 years. Many years ago, before COVID, we used to talk about the fact, what would happen if we closed a day? What would employers think if all of their employees didn't come to work? Well, what we're finding now is COVID kind of taught us what would actually happen if we closed. And the ramifications of that are continuing because the economy is affected by our industry. So I'm presenting on how it stifles the economy. So first of all, families have a hard choice. Do they spend $300 a week for their infant and toddler to be in care, or does a family figure out how one parent, typically mom, stays home to care for the children? And then the family's disrupted. One parent is at home. They lose seniority in the workforce. And also, there is an increase in government assistance needed all of a sudden. So now we're eligible for food stamps, we're eligible for programs, so the burden on the government also increases. And then there's the labor shortage. I was talking to somebody in Girard yesterday. Both Dollar General stores were closed because they didn't have people to work that day. You know, you see it with long lines, even if you're a McDonald's, you just basically see it everywhere. And with our industry not being fully supported to care for all of the children that need us, that's going to continue to happen. And then business slows. So if you're a manufacturer and you don't have enough employees to cover all of your shifts, then all of a sudden you can't make your products. Household income decreases. And then my favorite part, talking about the children. So when infants and toddlers don't have access to high quality care, they get behind. They don't learn speech. They don't learn social emotional development. They're not with their peers crawling around on the floor. They're not exposed to our curriculum where we're teaching them not basically letters and numbers, but social emotional skills, everything that they need to go to kindergarten. And then they're not prepared. So then we put a burden on the special education system right out of the gate. And we typically see it at CDC, and we care for more than 1,000 kids in Erie. When children go to preschool, then all of a sudden they're flagged with behaviors. They're flagged with a lack of a certain skill. So then the early intervention group, the City of Erie School District, needs to get involved to help the children. And then finally, let's talk about the families. So if Erie can't figure this out, young people, I have a 30, a 28, and a 25-year-old, myself, they're going somewhere else. They're going to go to a community that believes in early childhood, believes in childcare, and the systems are better for the young people that need to access the system. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rena. That was very insightful. And next to join us is Elena Como, whose work she'll describe puts her as a hub in the center of this whole marketplace. Elena.
Good afternoon, everyone. Super excited to be here. I'm on the static for the mood meter, if you're familiar with the mood meter. This is a long day coming, 40 years for me, where we're finally getting communities as a whole together to really dive deep into what are the needs of communities around childcare and how can the community, not the state, not the federal government, make a positive impact as we move forward. As highlighted by our previous speakers, the childcare capacity crisis is a pressing issue in our community, particularly for our infants and toddlers. So not to preach about brain development, but everybody knows between 0 and 5 what happens in the brain, 80% of brain development, right? So our teachers, which you just heard about, they are brain engineers. In Pennsylvania, how much does a brain surgeon make? Anyone? 3, you can Google it, use your phone or your computer, $344,197 or $165 an hour. How many of you are making $165 an hour as a brain surgeon? Okay. Nope, me either. As an early childhood professional, when I left the profession to come to the hub in Erie, I was making a whopping $16 an hour and on my way to a master's degree, as Tiffany had mentioned. So my 16 versus 165. And how many of your teachers are at 16? Because across the state, the average wage for our early childhood professionals is $13 an hour. So we have a ways to go in getting our brain engineers even close to what our brain surgeons make. Early Learning Resource Center, how many of you are familiar with that? Because I don't want to talk a whole lot. It looks like most of you know what that is, so I don't want to go into that a lot. Challenges of providing care for children under the age of 3. A lot of that was addressed by Michelle and Rena. I just want to add that caring for infants and toddlers demands significant resources due to the need for individualized. So everybody wants that baby, your precious little, your child, your grandchild, your niece, your nephew. You want them to have the best individualized attention. That means low staff to child ratio. 1 to 4 is the requirement in Pennsylvania. 1 to 3 is best practice. Very difficult to get to the 1 to 3, right, ladies? Some other states, it's 1 to 5 still. Ideally, that individualized at 1 to 3 would be what we want to see for our babies. Staffing shortages was really highlighted by our team. That's a major crisis we see throughout the city of Erie. Quality and training needs. As Michelle and Rena said, fixing the lack of finance expertise doesn't fix the wages. And it is very, very disappointing because our state government had a bill on the table that could have helped this crisis, and it didn't pass. So disappointing is disappointing. So we can't look to the state or the feds to solve this crisis. We have to come together as a community and work together as a community to support our youngest learners, our babies, because we know they're born learning. The challenges facing childcare providers in Erie, particularly for infants and toddlers, are significant, not or insurmountable. Let's unite in our efforts to ensure that the childcare providers receive the necessary resources and supports to thrive. Thank you for your attention, and I am going to turn it over to Court.
Thank you, Elena, Michelle, Tiffany, and Rena as well for your presentation and your good work. So I'm going to provide some of the insights throughout the process, looking at the issue that were really striking. Then I'll get into the data and then the specific recommendations for you all. High on the list, picking up on the theme that Elena just shared, Erie cannot wait for the county, the state, the Fed to come in and solve this problem. And I think it's exemplified by the National League of Cities through its commitment to having an Institute for Youth Education and Families that states on their website, city leaders are best positioned to champion early education because they're closer to constituents and more in touch with the challenges than the state or the federal policy makers. Local government investment in early childcare also serves to demonstrate leadership in local match and leveraging of financial assistance from county, state, and federal government sources to the benefit of city residents. As shown in the report, the benchmarking that we did of some 25 other cities, their innovations, there's a growing trend and appreciation among communities that developing special funds and even passing ballot referendums or levying new taxes to expand access to child care is their mainstream strategy for economic development. They recognize that child care is infrastructure along the lines of highways and tax incentives and even broadband, for example, to workforce productivity. This slide I'm just going to leave up for quite a while because it's profound, I think, from the business perspective, which is another large insight from the report that the business community has come to see the high return on investment by helping their employees to meet their child care challenges. Just this year, The Pennsylvania Early Learning and Investment Commission, of which Andrea Haberman is a team member. She's the executive director. Together with the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, they reported that 81% of employers across the state indicate they have moderate or significant recruitment and retention issues due to the lack of childcare. Team member who's not with us, Karen Grimm-Thomas, in her editorial for the JES, she cited a recent study by the Boston Consulting Group and Moms First that calculated the return on investment of child care benefits offered by a host of companies. The findings included that any benefit, no matter how small it might seem, resulted in a positive ROI for their company. This held true whether they provided the benefit to salaried employees or hourly workers as well. In fact, the companies saw ROIs in the range of 90 to 425% on their modest investment in providing assistance to their employees. The authors reported that retaining as few as 1% of eligible employees targeted for these child care benefits covered the cost of offering that benefit to all of the company's eligible employees. Karen, in that same editorial, concludes that providing child care benefits, you can expect to see immediate and lasting gains in numerous areas for a company, including decreased costs associated with absenteeism, overtime, turnover, training, and bottom line profits related to increased productivity of those workers. Her findings were exemplified in the White House's American Job Plan that states that lack of access to child care makes it harder for parents, especially mothers, to fully participate in the workforce. Eye-popping in that document is the statement that in areas with the greatest shortage of child care slots, of which Erie unfortunately is high on the list, the women's labor force participation is about 3 percentage points less than in areas with high capacity for child care slots, hurting families and hindering growth and competitiveness. That 3% deficit or disadvantage among working women was also validated by a Columbia University expert on education that we tied in with through the process of researching the report. Another key area that was very disturbing is that the Erie Public Schools report, and we heard a little bit about this, that students who enter kindergarten unprepared to learn than those who enroll at grade level is very high and a big problem. This is evidenced by data the Erie Public Schools provided to us through the iReady Mathematics Diagnostic Assessment of 2023 and 24 that indicates 97% of Erie Public School kindergarten students are below grade level. The national norm is significantly less. Through another set of data, the dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills provided by Erie Public Schools, 65% of Erie Public School students are well below benchmark compared to a national level of 42%. This poor performance is likely due in some large part to Erie's lack of available quality child care services, or slots as we keep referring. And Superintendent Polito reports that due to the dire financial situation at the Erie Public Schools, the expensive remedial interventions necessary to catch those 60% of students up don't exist. Karen Ryan, Erie Public School Director of Education Services, observes, I quote, "One would be surprised how many children entering kindergarten is their first school experience." This is why we talk about education for infants and toddlers as school led by teachers. It's extremely expensive to try and remediate them. That's maybe too harsh a word, but it's a reality. Another area that's all too familiar with us all is Erie's economic performance. I cited 4 current benchmark analyses of Erie compared to other cities around the nation that rank us very low. It suggests that leadership in Erie are well served and that the community is ripe to take a fresh look at the wants and needs of, as I mentioned earlier, the pro-creative class, a twist on the creative class terminology. These are workers of childbearing age that the data show they are tops among drivers in a local economy. They're particularly mobile in this gig remote working workforce, and they are highly discriminating about living in places that have high quality of life. Access to affordable quality childcare is one of those key ingredients to high quality of life. So I'll go to the data that you'll find in the report, and a particular thank you to the Pennsylvania Partnerships for Children that helped us to quantify the level of need. And a big thank you to Elena Como and her team for conducting a rigorous survey of all of the childcare providers in the city of Erie. To her credit, there was 100% participation. That helped us with the side of the quotient on supply. So we needed to know what's the level of need, what's the level of supply. Therefore, we could get to the math of what is the gap for Erie. Just jumping ahead, the key remedy that we'll be talking about, as was hedged, is payment for teachers. Without teachers, you can't have the slots, you can't meet the required state ratio, and we used as a proxy 1:5 for our calculations. No teachers, no childcare. All right, the data. Looking at the year, the Diurnal Census of 2020, there were 3,481 infants and toddlers, that is, age birth 0 up to 3 years in the city of Erie. A representative number, of course, birth rates will change from any given year to another year. Of those 3,481, 70% of them live below 200% of the federal poverty level. That's approximately double that of Pennsylvania, which is 35.5%, and the nation, which is 38%. We're at 70%, just showing the duress that working families shoulder here in Erie. This is suggestive, and the premise was borne out by other experts we talked to, that Erie City's parents of infants and toddlers are working at similar rates as their peers across the state, but are not receiving commensurate rates of compensation to pull them out of this low-income bracket. Using a proxy for which parents of this age of children would be desiring of childcare outside of the home, we came up with 2,405 of those 3,481, or 69%. Of Erie's infants and toddlers would be desiring of affordable quality child care. There are 40 providers of child care in the city of Erie. 30 of them, licensed providers, care for infants and toddlers, so 10 don't. As we said earlier, it's hard and expensive, so hats off to those that are stepping up to do it. Those 30 out of 40 enroll 653 infants and toddlers. That's 27%. Less than a third of those needing care, if you remember the earlier data. So that provides a gap of 1,552 children or slots not enrolled among those 30 providers, which is a 73% gap. We reduced that gap by 12% down to 1,542 slots by using a proxy of 12% less, which relates to families of children that are eligible for state subsidy, but they're choosing to enroll or place their children in non-licensed providers. This is a conservative estimate. Others we talked to said it could be quite bigger, but it's an important one to acknowledge. We didn't go out and do primary research on that level of data as we did on some of the others. So as I mentioned, the top need or strategy or remedy for decreasing the gap is teacher pay. So the number one priority is to stabilize the 30 providers in the city that serve those 653 infants and toddlers by raising the current pay of their teachers by $5 an hour from an average, and many of them don't even make 15 presently, but we use 15 as the baseline to get them up to a modest $20 per hour. I'll mention that the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and their living wage calculator pegs a living wage in Erie of around $30 per hour. So this is modest, but completely essential to, as the team shared with you, make early childcare for infants and toddlers, the pay for teachers competitive with what they can earn elsewhere in the retail world, let alone enrolling as staff in the public school system, perhaps. So that was priority number one. Let's stabilize the precious few and very important quality slots that we currently have in the city. The number two priority is based on the survey that Elena and her team issued. Those 30 providers indicate that they have about 59 staff vacancies presently. And if those slots were filled, again, using that 5-to-1 ratio, that would add another 292 slots, reducing the gap down to 1,250 slots. This is all in the report. The cost to stabilize and then fix or fill the vacancies to bring those slots down to 1,250 would cost $1,971,840, so almost $2 million. So the next level to try to close further the gap is to serve 1,250 needed or gap remaining slots by luring another 250 teachers into the early child care business for infants and toddlers. That alone would cost $2.6 million, again, factoring adding just $5 an hour to their baseline of $15 an hour annualized salary. Combine the two, it's $4.6 million a year to provide ample choice for the approximate 2,195 needed licensed quality slots in the city of Erie. That equates to a cost of just over $2,000 per child. Based on all that you've heard before, that seems like an extraordinarily efficient and well-invested economic play for the city of Erie. Note, however, keep in the back of your mind that simply paying the extra $5 an hour to lure teachers or keep them isn't the full picture. That still relies on those child care facilities of shouldering the base up to $15 an hour, the cost of the buildings, the additional classroom space, the operating space, the cost, as you heard, of staff development as well. But that additional $5 an hour does make child care slots available, whereas presently, as we have shown, there's a gaping deficiency. So to the recommendations. To address the additional capacity, the report has a host of recommendations with their costs detailed in the report as well. The first recommendation is around Infinite Erie. Infinite Erie, as you know, has the priority playbook for the top essentials for Erie's renaissance presently. And the top recommendation is for early child care for infants and toddlers, bridging this $5 an hour gap, and the other recommendations that I'll get into become a top playbook priority for Infinite Erie. And for Infinite Erie to stand up or comprise an Erie Infant and Toddler Investment Partnership to incrementally tackle the report's recommendations, its remedies, and to track progress along the way. This recommended Erie Infant and Toddler Investment Partnership would be tasked to not pursue an additional tax or a ballot referendum as our benchmarking of some 25 other cities. Many of them are doing that. We just felt Erie, with the economics that we just shared with you, the struggles, could not shoulder additional financial burden at the household level, but rather to aid in the development of a number of essential structures to enable implementation of these priority remedies for addressing Erie's early child care challenges. So those essential structures that this Erie Infant and Toddler Investment Partnership would help to bring to life. One, an Erie Infant and Toddler Investment Fund focused on wages for child care educators to gain financial investment, donations from the public and also private entities. And in step with guidelines to be established by the partnership, this fund would oversee the dispensation of resources on competitive and performance basis to the early child care providers in the city that serve toddlers. To be successful, the fund would require excellence in its formation, management, composition, promotion, and continually evidence fact-based performance an impact review would be needed. Oversight and staffing are essential and could be envisioned as following. Either, to begin with, Infinite Erie could manage the fund in-house or could delegate funds administration to a willing agency. We have two here that are already doing some of this already in other fashions. Elena's organization, the Northwest Institute of Research, which also operates the ELRC for our region, could certainly perform this role. They already administer the state Childcare Work Subsidy Program for families in our region, and they also administer an infant-toddler contracted slots pilot program. The other that is in position that would be a ready partner is represented by Michelle Harkins at Early Connections, Inc. They already manage the Erie Future Fund, which was established some years ago, recognizing this problem. It, however, is focused on the full county, and funds contributed to it are not eligible for use with infants and toddlers. So it's ripe to be modified and expanded in its excellence as a model. As she mentioned, she already is administering the innovative early childhood apprenticeship program and the pre-apprenticeship programs as well that stand to be modeled and elevated. In either case, staff would need to be hired. The recommended compensation levels are included in the report to work with companies to manage the program and to approach philanthropic businesses and individuals for support, to work to achieve an annual budget allocation by the City of Erie, and to work with businesses in Erie to harness the well-known Neighborhood Assistance Program that also has the Neighborhood Partnership Program and the SPP as well. These are state tax advantage programs for businesses, but it is not evident that those programs can be used for infants and toddlers. I've been assured that they can, but that's not well known. As I mentioned, we're not recommending a new tax at this time. As an aside, there's a very potent tool that's being used internationally and in some jurisdictions in the city, referred to as social impact bonds, which capitalize investment and pay back based on the ability of interventions to reduce a financial burden in the social arena. At the hopeful day, for example, when Erie Public Schools does have the resources to expend on remediating children as they come into the system to get them to grade level, those funds can be used to leverage borrowing and demonstrated impact when, with infant and child care services, those youth entering the Erie Public School System no longer need, representing a huge savings. Our superintendent thinks that would be a very interesting, innovative financial play to look at in the future, hopefully when Erie Public School finances are more robust. Another significant infrastructure, as I mentioned, is creating an infant and toddler teacher pipeline in the city and a professional development program. Those that Michelle is piloting, as I mentioned, are ripe to be expanded. Many of you also know Kelly Armour in our community. Some years ago, she pioneered a program called Old Songs, New Opportunities, where she engaged and readied 65 new Americans to become early child care workers in our centers in the city. She has a prospectus that's well delineated of the cost to reinvigorate and expand that program, as Erie has a great wealth of new Americans, infants, and refugees who bring extraordinary skills in lots of areas, especially in early child care. Another area for development is around circuit riders or shared professionals to help our local providers with things like accounting, finance, billing, human resources that will enable them to focus their attentions on their core business, taking care of our kids day in, day out. As I mentioned, the $5 additional per teacher pay doesn't address the cost of facilities. All providers in the city of Erie now are at a point of not having the cash resources to be able to expand their facilities. And while the city surely needs more large facilities with multiple classrooms, the city also benefits, as you can guess, in many ways from having a plethora of smaller childcare facilities sprinkled around our neighborhoods. Many smaller facilities, for example, assure ease of access for many parents who don't own cars or where bus service is limited. And small neighborhood providers also present environments that are culturally aligned with our rich demographics that I was just mentioning, and that change literally from block to block throughout our rich cultural and racially endowed city, where there are said to be 50 different languages represented within the Erie public school system. Be it any of the existing 30 providers that we've talked about, all early education providers in the city would benefit from assistance in capitalizing their expansions to more classroom space. Even those with a long waiting list lack the resources to add classrooms. This market area traditionally faces barriers to financing for capital needs, facility expansions, or even new locations in buildings. So, recommendation, Erie should either create its own or bring in another that I'll talk about, a child care facilities impact investment fund. Or, as I mentioned, there are existing such funds around the country. One of them is called Mission Driven Finance, which on its website indicates it was founded in 2016 to fill the gap between philanthropic and traditional investments. Among their portfolio of child care facilities around the country, their focus is on real estate to increase child care access. They have an entity called the Care Access Real Estate arm. It's an investment trust that expands the availability of facilities to provide quality child care. And for any provider of care that is leasing from them after 2 years, they can choose to buy the facility. So it's a way of chasing risk-mitigated capital from investments and plowing it directly into this need of increased capacity of child care facilities in the city. Another structural area, I've mentioned a couple times the role that city governments have. And again, the benchmarking indicates there's a strong role. We can't wait for the Fed or states to come in and handle this problem. Again, the National League of Cities is devoting and consulting to jurisdictions around the country. But our city of Erie government would be well served, as I mentioned, to create an annual budget allocation focused on teacher pay, to focus on teacher development and the pipeline, as we described, to gain education and credentials to serve infants and toddlers. The city would be well served to have a program focused on developers, providing them density and height bonuses to build child care facilities here in the city, and also actively access city land and property. There's lots of facilities in the area that could be repurposed for early education classrooms, I suspect. Tax incentives, the city could start looking at ways to provide more abatements or incentives to the providers of child care, the property owners, and also employers that are contributing or helping those in the city. Point to Duolingo as some inspiration. Zoning and land use is another area that the city would be well served for this interdepartmental task force to make sure they eliminate any mandates, for example, of off-street parking that make it hard for a child care provider to grow, or any existing zoning or ordinance hindrances to building child care facilities in any neighborhood throughout the city. The topic of public transportation, our Erie's Metropolitan Transit Authority will soon be entering into a transit development plan. They would be well served to examine the location of child care facilities, which is available in GIS within the city, and ascertain, does bus service provide ready access and connectivity for our parents and families, particularly given that the city's website indicates 69% of downtown Erie residents don't own a car, and overall citywide 17% don't own a car. So in conclusion, which we'll leave half an hour, we're right on for dialogue with you all, more sustainable than any one-time economic play would be institutionalizing a system of high-quality, affordable care for infants and toddlers that pays forward tremendous, lasting, and multiple dividends. Given the preponderance of data connecting early child care to a wide range of what it takes for a city to prosper, Erie is well advised to double down on supporting families' needs for quality, affordable care for infants and toddlers to support talent attraction and address this real barrier to workforce participation and thus the economy, let alone the well-being of our children. As I mentioned, family-friendly is today's essential capital, thus firmly establishing that balance is necessary in the type of policy and incentives that Erie deploys in pursuit of prosperity at the city level. Invest in kids, grow a prosperous community. In this way, Erie both nurtures its future and addresses an immediate need whereby quality childcare is essential economic development, and doing so stands to win the competition among cities for attracting and retaining talent that sometimes we refer to as ratables because they are our tax base. I'll stop there and invite you all to share your questions or observations, and our team will join me in responding and answering those. So thank you all very much. We've got about half hour.
Sure.
Thank you. Before we begin, if you have a question for a specific panel member, please state their name so Bailey can give them the microphone. Thank you.
So I have like a three-part question. I didn't hear you mention the education improvement tax credit, and I know they have a pre-K. Anyway, if you could address that, how are children with disabilities served in all of this? And I know people who are kind of on the edge with what they make, and they have to factor when they're looking at a different job. If I make a little bit more money, I won't qualify for Medicaid anymore, and people who are having housing issues. So these, besides just compensation, affordable housing and healthcare are big issues for people who are looking for work.
Right. The education improvement tax credit addressed in the report, not eligible for infants and toddlers. It's a dedicated program, but illustrative of the missing years or the years that parents have to go it alone. We need at the state level a commensurate program that provides companies the tax benefit to focus on infants and toddlers. Duolingo is doing it. $1 million a year commitment, not even to just their own employees, but rather to childcare facilities proximate to their location. Yeah, you're right. There are many other critical problems in our community. You mentioned health care and elder care, for example. Has been said, our teachers of infants and toddlers are the workforce behind the workforce. We don't have doctors, nurses, physician attendants without child care. We don't have attendants at our long-term care facilities, in our manufacturing facilities. So that's why I think the Jefferson Educational Society was very wise in focusing on infants and toddlers, as they are the bottom of the pyramid supporting the whole workforce and economy.
Do you have to vet all of your staff members and volunteers? And if you do, how many do you lose for not passing the vetting process?
I'll ask one of the team members. You're referring to child care workers at a licensed facility?
Yes.
Okay. Rena.
So our staff goes through at least 5 clearances: FBI, NSOR, child abuse, mandated reporter, and state police. It is rare that somebody does not qualify to be employed. I think people in general understand that you're going to have to pass all of that before you can be employed in one of our centers.
In addition to that, the clearances, I also do checks. Social media is huge for me, so I like to go to pages and see what their content discussion, what their friends look like, how do they spend time outside of work.
Did that answer your question okay? All right. We're doing well.
Hello. According to the Department of Human and Health Services, they suggest that about 7% of your yearly income should go towards childcare. And with the average household in Erie bringing in about $43,135, That would bring childcare to about $251.62 a month. Do you think that with this, where you're going with this, will you be able to get it down to that 7%? Because I can say when my daughter was an infant, I was paying that per week. So do you think you'll be able to get down to 7%? Because that'd be really exciting.
Well, as you know, our focus was on teachers and slots. Without teachers, there aren't the slots. Without the slots, it's a non-issue whether a family can pay for it or not, because it's not even an option. So the first priority is to create choice and option for families. One of our team members, Shirley, will speak to the number of families that unfortunately that are eligible for the child care work subsidy, but don't take advantage of it here in the city. Again, largely because there aren't slots available. But Elaine?
Yeah, so that both national and state recommendation of no family pays more than 7% of their income. When you're a subsidized family, so if you come to the ELRC and you go through the eligibility process, your share of your child care expenses will never be more than 7%. So your share might be $5 copay a week, or it might be a $70 or $80 copay a week, depending on your household composition and your overall family income. It's bold to say every person in our nation will never pay more than 7% of their household income, despite any eligibility requirements. I mean, that would be great if we got there. We have a capacity issue first, though. There's not even enough child care to go around for everyone, which I think that's what we want to try and tackle, is financing what is appropriately financing what is happening today and building to support that 1,500 families who can't go to work because there's no child care spot available to them. I mean, we really want to tackle that issue too, and maybe at that point the feds will figure out how to go back to World War II, when we did have a system in place that funded child care. While our strong men were overseas, our women went back to the factories, and they worked in the factories, and we had a national child care system. Would be lovely to get back to that. I don't know that we're going to see that, though, and I don't want a World War III. So not speaking to that at all.
Please.
First, I'd like to thank all of you that care for our children every day. And thank you for this report. It is so important. But I have a difficult question, which is, what is the appetite in our city leadership and our school district leadership? I think we've gotten to this horrible point because we have a true lack of imagination in what normally is our leadership, being number one, male, number two, usually in age where they've never had to deal with child care and the problems. And it just seems that so much concentration on economic development has to do with buildings and giving tax breaks rather than what we know is our future, our children. So I really would like to know, has there been an appetite in leadership?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the Erie Future Fund that was created some years ago by leadership, including the Erie Community Foundation, is exemplar of that appetite. I'd like to think that the report answers a key question, which is, what do we do about it? This is a new day where across the country, as mentioned, as heightened by COVID, an appreciation for the importance of childcare, particularly to the economy, to businesses. And I think we are one of the very few cities that I found that have done the primary research and quantified the problem, the supply, the need, the gap, what intervention makes the most sense, what it would cost, and how to stand it up and get it going. Erie is right-sized to tackle this issue. These numbers are not that big compared to, as you mentioned, other economic development plays that we routinely make. Rather, this is a reframe of childcare as some social initiative to now one that has gained popularity or acceptance on both sides of the aisle as driven by the business community, National Chamber of Commerce, Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, Erie Chamber of Commerce, business leaders. We've provided the blueprint, the map of what can be done. So the Jefferson Educational Society is to be commended for seizing this moment and providing the clear steps of what needs to be done. And I suspect that they and perhaps all of you will be standing ready to share the insights from the report and move this agenda to quick action. Erie can't afford to not address the lack of child care slots. We're already paying for it in so many ways in the business sector and social ills.
Hey, Clark, thank you so much for pulling the team together and for the report. It's well needed. I've been on this kick lately of opportunity cost. There's several other organizations I work with that highlight that. And certainly here, with our childhood population, we're talking about the potential that they have and what is lost if we don't address this, and our opportunities that can be provided. Just one example, well known among the community, Elizabeth Warren, senator out of Massachusetts, indicates that she would have gotten really nowhere were it for the availability of child care. And here she's a senator. How many people, how many kids, what are we losing because we don't give opportunity? Now, you know, it's been stated in the city of Erie, we have a 44% childhood in poverty population. How many of that 44% are there because their parents or their family situation does not afford them the ability to get care and go to work? It's a big deal. I mean, this ties in with so many things, and it's really an imperative. It's not just wish list.
Yeah.
Lastly, my question would be, are there any best practices or any cities out there that are doing it well that don't rely on state or federal funding? Because that's always been the model. Yeah. Obviously, that model is failing. Is there anybody you can point to out there? Thank you very much.
Sure. 25 of them. Take a look at the benchmarking report or section of the report. I won't even try to pull any particular one out of them, but there are innovations that I found in 25 different cities. Erie would be joining a growing cadre of those that are not waiting. To a couple of your points, Art, one study that we saw in the process referred to the unfortunate reality of children watching children so that parents can go to work, which leads to high absenteeism in our school systems. And then on the opportunity cost, the report cites the Early Learning Investment Coalition did a statewide survey of an economic analysis just a year ago. The financial burden to Pennsylvania in productivity, wages, turnover, $1.3 billion annually opportunity cost. Thanks for that. Good question.
Okay, I have a number of questions, but I just want to go back when you stated that the school district is stating that most of the children coming into the school system are not ready for school. Now, and you said that most likely it's because they didn't have a good child care program. Well, what about the people, the parents that are raising their kids? I mean, in that, and I don't know if you were saying that that in the years ahead that, or you're driving at the fact that all children should have some type of child care. even if the parents are at home. Is that what you're driving at? To get the kids ready for school?
Yes. All parents would be well served to have some basic training in the development of the human brain in the first 1,000 years. There is I hate the word pedagogy.
Mm-hmm.
Science shows us that there are certain very simple exercises, and I'll invite the team, in interacting with an infant and toddler that will expedite the connection of neurons, that will facilitate team collaboration. Most important is the relationship and the trust between a caregiver and a child, and that be consistent over time. One of the team members do a better job in this question, but sir, I think I know where you're coming from. We all, and myself included, consider ourselves expert at raising our children.
Right.
Based on what I've learned, I wonder what the impact would have been if I went and got a little bit of school. I had to have driver training and read a manual, pass a test, do a physical test to drive a car. I didn't have to do any of that to partner with my wife to raise our children. They turned out okay. But our family had the resource, the time, a stay-at-home mom. We weren't working 2, 3, 4 jobs after hours in the city of Erie. So yes, I'll stand behind the statement. Every caregiver, be it a guardian, a parent, a foster, would be well served to have a little bit of the training. And that's a good role for this partnership to roll out some of the very essentials that are optional. We're not talking about requirements or a license.
The thing is that we've had the program, and I've often questioned this myself. I've never really did any study, but it's a Project Head Start. I mean, that's been in existence for years, and yet we haven't seen any. They said that there's been improvement, but I haven't seen the improvement.
Harkins.
I guess there's research that shows there, and I don't want to speak for Rena, but I want to stand up for her. There's research that shows that there is improvement, because you look at that social emotional development, which is crucial in those ages. They're showing that through the years in school, there is improvement with the children that come from Head Start, not only just in school, but beyond school, graduation. And that's what we all try to do in quality centers. What I find that's neat with families is, you're normal, right? You're normal with your children when you're home, but we have parents, guardians, grandparents that will come up to us and say, this is going on. Is that normal? Does that happen with everyone in that age group? And it can be sometimes, and sometimes it's not. So in quality centers, we find supportive teams that can assess to see, because we're not ones that diagnose, but we can provide those connections to supportive services. And I see some of them here that really make a difference in our community with those children. And then you see the children with those that might not be the typically developing child catch up before they even go into kindergarten, and that puts them way ahead of the game. So that's what we see at centers, and I appreciate you saying that, Court. Thank you.
Is that helpful, sir? Is that helpful?
Yeah.
All right, good. Thanks for that.
Sir, Child Development Centers has been the Head Start grantee for the past 5 years. We have 659 slots. About half of those children go to kindergarten. So when you think of the size of the school district for the impact that we do have an impact, but all children are not flowing through Head Start. There's a maximum number that can. Our assessment data for the last 5 years, which is all I can speak to, does show that our children are scoring above 80% on our assessment tools, which means that we're feeling pretty confident that we're sending our children to kindergarten ready for the next phase of their development and their education. But it's a very limited number of children when you think about the volumes of children that will go to kindergarten. So we all need to do it together. Like, one of us cannot do it alone.
Well, no,
Yeah. So Head Start's been known to be very effective, but it's just not enough children going through the system.
Go ahead. Let me I would answer. I would just quantify that number of 1450 too. So it takes 5 years for that child to go to kindergarten. So take 1450 times 5. That's how many children are going into our public school system that have had no semblance of a formalized program, whether it's a high quality childcare program, a pre-K counts program, high quality infant and toddler care, even our relative care providers. We have an individual with a PhD who outreaches to all of our relative providers to give all of the relative providers resources and supports, because we don't care what the family's choice for childcare is. We want every child to go to school ready to learn. So we're really focused on trying to get resources in the hands of every care provider, no matter, what the family choice is.
In addition to that, you mentioned about parents receiving education. I know between the two, you kind of bounce off of that. So the quality centers, we actually do. So many of us have one-on-one conferences with our parents more than twice a year. We actually offer ours at ABC once a month, and the standard is twice a year, but we do it once a month to help meet the needs of families. In addition to that, we partner with other organizations, whether it's a financial institution, whether it's Erie Public Schools or the Key, whatever it might be, to share with them, and also conferences that Her Power did a conference, we included parents. So the same education that our teachers are getting, we'd like to share that with the parents as well and have them come in to our facilities for our PTO parent conferences or whatever to receive the same education, to learn how to engage with their children, whether we're doing math with your kids or making food fun. We do all kinds of things with our parents to share education, what our teachers are learning.
Hi, thank you. I felt brave for a moment to raise my hand. So this is really eye-opening. All of the statistics that you've shared today, it's so important for the community to hear it. For those of us who have been in this space, working professionally in early child care and education, we're excited for this moment. Elena said the word best, elated, just to have this all culminating together. But I raised my hand as a mom first, okay? A mom who has a bachelor's degree, went through college, read every book I could find, thought I was doing all that I could, took the classes through the Women's Care Center, how to bathe your baby, all this stuff. Had the Children Do Come With Directions booklet that I picked up from the hospital when my son was born before I knew about Success by 6 and ended up in joining Early Connections and that actually. But I still struggled and hungry to learn all the time, but feeling like a uniform type of offering, whether it's more funding to parenting programs like through the Erie Family Center, but especially the high quality childcare centers and the value that brings, quality early learning. My boys attended quality care and education from the time they were 8 weeks all the way through, school age, before and after care, summer camp. And I learned so much still. And just seeing and conversing with the providers and the resources that were available in the centers, it made me a better mom. And I thought I knew going in there. And I did know some things, and that's all well and good, but I still learned a ton. So I can't even begin to wrap my mind around what that would be like for some of our families who fall below that 70% and the 200% income threshold. I just can't even understand it. But one thing that I do know is in my work through Success by 6 and United Way of Erie County, the kindergarten readiness toolkits and all that, and the outreach that we did, parents care. They might not have the resources available to them. So I just wanted to spell that. It's like, well, why? These parents are at home and they have the kids and stuff. They do care, and they do the best that they can with the resources available to them. And what they're bringing to the situation as a parent, like generationally, how they were raised, how things were done, cultural norms, and so on. So as someone who
maybe we could have made it work to stay home with my boys. I do carry that mom guilt because that's a thing too. When you're going back to work, you know, you're stuck in the middle and all that. And I'll be the first to say we didn't qualify for the subsidies or anything like that, but we made it work. Would I do it all over again the same? Would I have put my boys through if I had the choice not to do that? Maybe for me, but for them, I think the best thing absolutely would have been to have them in high quality early care and education, because I know that it did wonders for them. And we weren't without our struggles, you know, and that's that welcoming back and forth dialogue that you can have with centers and systems in place and wanting to be better all the time. Of course, we want to stand up and improve and make things better. But would I have changed it? I don't think so. I definitely would have paid that cost and had them go all over again because they're better for it, for sure. And they were kindergarten ready. They were. My son was 4 and turned 5 the first week of kindergarten. He was assessed by the school psychologist to start because he was a late August birthday, August 29th, and Mill Creek's district cutoff is September 1st, and Dr. Quirk assessed him and said, yes, he's ready academically. Socially, he struggled. And I'm not going to disclose like some of that out in the open, but, you know, there's a lot more awareness about neurodivergency. I will say that in the community now that just we didn't know years before. But academically, yes, he was absolutely ready. And that's because of high quality early care and education.
Thank you. I'm glad that was recorded because it was beautiful and eloquent and drives home an important point that Erie's economy depends on you. We celebrate our women, particularly our working mothers, as there are more in the workforce in Erie than there are men. There are more women in Erie's colleges and universities than there are men, and women tend to predominantly be the caregivers, so drivers of our economy.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
So we saw a lot of money in Erie, the ARP money go to, when I look at these priorities, probably much lesser priorities. And we have the CDBG process going on. Is childcare, or is this infant and toddler, is it eligible for any of that kind of funding? But I think as a community, you know, to segue onto what Cindy said, we should be talking to leadership and say, why are you making the decisions with our ARP money that aren't the highest priorities in our community, but also is the CDBG money accessible for this?
Early child care can check just about any box with regard to community development, economic development, education, family duress, you name it. So yeah, there are avenues that directly represent. They're not crystal clear, and as I mentioned in the state incentive program, they don't list early child care as eligible, but yes, it is. The larger answer is this study commissioned by the Jefferson Educational Society is a good house for it. Jefferson Educational Society has a good megaphone, a large following, is paid attention to by thought leaders, and has a very large swagger in the community. So we'll watch eagerly to see how this pebble drop turns into a large ripple as Erie grabs an opportunity that many other cities are just starting to realize and elevates it as one of the mainstream economic development strategies on par with anything else that we might do. All right. Thank you all very much. We're right at conclusion time on time. Thank you.
Thank God.